back with my LS swap dually project. And this time we've got spaghetti. Got the 94 dually harness in my LS harness. In this video we're going to strip them down, remove everything we don't need, test fit them in here, figure out where to put the fuse box, ECU, etc. And finally loom it all up and try and make it look nice. Let's get started. So one of the big challenges with any engine swap is obviously the wiring. That's what seems to scare everyone. LS swaps, you can literally just buy a harness off of Amazon. It's supposedly decent. But the often used LT1 swap website has lots of good information. I'm going to be using that to just keep the factory harness. So we've got the factory harness here. I just stripped all the old loom and everything off, cleaned it up a little bit, and I'll start de-pinning all the stuff that we want to get rid of. I'm not going to get too into it because this is covered a lot, and a first time noob like me is probably not the person you want to learn from. So I will start with removing the pins that I want to get rid of. One connector down, pop these covers back on to the next. Okay, that's all the wires from the red connector. Pop the covers back on. I only stabbed myself with my pick trying to get that stinking back cover off. That hurt. Now I just got to fish these all out and remove the other end. So I pulled all the pins that I removed from the ECU connectors back. Got all these saved in case I want to put something else into the ECU. Bunch of grounds. You follow the grounds back from the connectors you're removing. You'll get a lot of them that come to these splice packs. I'm just cutting them tight to the splice pack like this wire. Got basically this whole blue, the C152 or 153 connectors out. The whole EGR connector. All the park neutral safe, or I guess not neutral safety, the gear indicator, the secondary O2s. I think I'm gonna, again, save all these because they have ECU pins on them. Other than that, I'm gonna see if there's any other connectors in here that I want to remove. I'm saving the ignition power wires at the fuse box, and just be a convenient way to add stuff in the truck later. And once I go through that one more time, I'll start working on the 94 dualies wiring harness, cutting that down. Hopefully the last modification to the LS harness. I want to be able to log oil pressure and HP tuners, so I'm trying, I believe this is Corvette pinning. Got oil pressure 0 volt reference. It's just going to go to the splice for the O2 sensor grounds. And then 5 volt reference and signal. 5 volt goes to pin 7 on the blue connector. And signal, I'm stealing the old oil pressure gauge sensor wire, is going to pin 58 on the red connector. So of course there is still more that I need to do on the LS harness. First, because I'm using the LS fuse box, I need to power the ignition pin in the C100 connector with a fused 10 amp run start circuit. So I'm going to use the ECM ignition fuse in the 94 from pin A1 on the 6.5 diesel ECM for that. And I got to run power from the fuel pump relay, which is of course in the one fuse box connector that I tossed. That's this very corner pin. So I'll have to come up with something to keep that from falling off, but I just grabbed a pin out of the C1 connector. Okay, so now I'm working through the external connections from the LS harness to the 94. Got my C100, which has speedo, check engine light, brake switch, tack, which I'm not going to use currently because it won't work with the diesel cluster that I have, and then an ignition wire just in case I need it. Got my OBD2, all those connections labeled, and cruise. Gotta dig in to the pinouts to make sure there's nothing else here that I'm missing. One more external connection is this pin 17 of the red connector AC request wire. I believe that'll be my only connection to the 94 AC system. Everything else will be run by the 94 AC control module, but I've got this one connection just telling the ECU that the AC is on. And now I gotta tie into the 94 engine harness. I won't bore you with another time lapse of me stripping the loom off. So for the LS harness, my goal is to have everything kind of in the factory location that it would have been on the Silverado that this came out of. So fuse box and ECU on the driver's side. So I'm going to start with the fuse box. I think I might want to have it in here somewhere. And then, like in the Silverado, I'm going to mount the ECU on the fender liner somewhere in here. So going from there, I will figure out the harness routing and kind of get this test fit. So I've got the wiring roughly laid out, and before I start trying to fit the harness from the 94 and splice everything and make it perfect, I've got a few of the major components that I want to fit in here, that I want to get in place to make sure everything works. Number one being the fuse box. I've got the 2002 mount for the fuse box. Then the ECU mount, again from the 2002. And I have the cruise control module, which luckily on these OBS or GMT400 trucks, this is actually the same for the cable driven LS. So this should fit fairly factory. I'm going to start with the fuse box. So as it is, this mount will not fit in here. Obviously I'm gonna have to trim it some. And I'm gonna delete the ABS on this. It was not working great when the truck was driving, and it's fairly easy to delete on this, so that'll get rid of some of this. So I'll start with that and cutting this box down and trying to get this all to fit. So that gets us a little bit more room, but obviously I'm still gonna have to trim this up. Probably remove pretty much everything other than what the main fuse box sits in. So I think this is the orientation I'm going with. It's a little bit counterintuitive when I was looking at it, but this base for the fuse box is contoured for a fender, and to get it to fit the contour of this one, it faces that direction. I only got to run a small bundle of wires out the side, so it should work. I think I can get a little bit of slack in it. I should be able to run these under this loop. This loop is actually some kind of previous owner hack job. I'm not sure what happened there, so I could eventually make this run straight down instead of out the side like it is. But that's what I'm gonna go with. Now I gotta come up with a way to mount it. There you go. 2002 fuse box in a 94 truck. Still gotta figure out some way to mount the cover piece because I had to cut off all the tabs that held it on the Silverado, but can come up with something. Looks okay, kind of looking at the ugly side on this side, but I can come up with something to hide that. Got a little too carried away with the grinder. So now I've got my PCM. Obviously I'm starting to make it pretty crowded in here. I've got the factory Silverado PCM mount, which would typically kind of go in here on the Silverado, but all my power steering hoses are in the way. I think what I'm gonna do is use this hole on the back level and mounted under the battery tray, and then I'll come up with something else to brace it. But that will put the PCM somewhere in here. So I'm gonna trim up the bracket and try that. Alright, PCM is mounted. Not the prettiest thing ever, but relatively in the factory location. A little less crowded than it would have been if I tried to slam it in here somewhere. So, try to get this wiring sorted out, and then we can move on to the cruise control module. Got the wiring organized a little bit better. Now, like I said before, these cable cruise control modules are essentially the same as what would have came on this truck. And because of that, I actually have dimples in the firewall to mount the module. This was a 6.5 turbo diesel previously, so the cruise was all controlled by the PCM originally on this truck, so it didn't have the cable. But I have the holes or dimples already here. I am gonna have to move this relay for the brakes, I believe this is for. I don't know, it's a little bit weird. I actually cut the wires in the harness until I realized I think I actually need this. I don't think I need this. I think this is the barometric sensor for the 6.5. So I think I can get rid of this and hopefully move this to one of those holes and then mount the cruise control module. cruise modules installed in the factory location. Got my, is this a C100 connector? The connector from the LS harness with the, it does have one wire between it and the cruise. And I think once I tidy up the LS harness a little bit, I will grab the 94 and try to get everything organized how it should look as one harness. So now that I've got the LS harness nicely organized, it's time to add this mess. Got the harness from the 94. We'll get it mocked up and see if we can get these two combined in a relatively nice way. So clearly I didn't keep this one in as organized of a condition as the LS harness, so I'm going to be untangling this for a while. I'll throw it in time lapse and we'll see if we can make sense of this. Alright, I think I'm calling that good. Obviously it looks like way more of a mess because I got the wires I need to lengthen still here. Most of that is the cruise control wiring's got to go from here to where the 94 control wiring comes out. So I got to extend that. I'm going to have to extend the temp gauge because it was originally on this side of the 6.5 and we're moving it over here. Kind of looks like a disaster with all my cut zip ties and tape and everything, but I think I've got everything connected, lengthened. Again, mostly cruise control and a few other things. I still got grounds, which I'm gonna do in the truck because most of them were kind of seized on, so I just left the pigtails attached to the eyelets and cut these, so I gotta splice those. Otherwise, it's just about ready to loom. My last little project here is going to be the alternator. So this is actually the 94 connector that I just left in, and this is the LS. Basically, because this is going in a diesel truck, which I'm leaving the diesel cluster for now, the tach is actually run off of the alternator. And I do over there have the LS white wire for eventually going to a gas cluster. But for now, I gotta get this wire connected to the alternator. This is the charge light, it's also gonna go in. So I'm going to, I need a whole new alternator plug. I actually have one. So I'm gonna repin and put a alternator plug with the tach wire in it. New alternator plug. So hopefully I didn't miss anything, and I'm gonna start looming this up. Well, I think I'm calling it there. Not super thrilled with this 2-inch braided loom. I probably would have been fine with the 1.5 or whatever. It would have looked better. But I do like the rest of it. Not great at my electrical taping, but otherwise I think this is what I'm going with. I got a couple loose wires still. I got my OBD2 to the OBD port. I still gotta figure out how I'm getting the wires inside the truck for that. I'm just leaving the single wire for the oil pressure gauge, low brake, etc. But not too bad. Did my final wiring connections. Had to lengthen the starter signal wire. I've got grounds on the back of both heads. Another ground down on the power steering pump mount. I have fuel pump power. I have the ignition power source to the fuse block. I'm currently leaving this wire. It's technically battery power to the ignition switch. I don't know that I need that. I think the 94 ignition switch has power to it through the chassis harness. So hopefully I'm fine there. I have my, if you can see it in the dark, OBD2 port mounted where the OBD1 was. With those connections, basically battery, ground, and the OBD2 data from the ECM. And then I spliced that ignition power source from the 94's fuse box using, I believe, this fuel solenoid ignition source, which used to be the injection pump for the 6.5 diesel. So I think the wiring is done. Hopefully I'm not having to fiddle with this once we get everything else hooked up and try to run it. So the next step before I can do the final fit up of everything, get everything connected and fluids filled, I gotta do something with the AC. And I have hopefully a budget solution that potentially for some of you guys could be free. So that will be the next project, is high mount AC with the factory pancake AC compressor. So if I ever actually edit these and make them into videos, and if anyone's actually watching, that will be the next video.